what about supplementation?
Right.
Are there things that we should be doing like NAD, or should we be on metformin? Like, what about exogenous substances?
So everything we've been talking about is what I call a foundation. And that's what you can do for free. And it's going to help you a certain amount. And then you can go into the next levels, which is how do I change what was normally going to happen? And so what these supplements are going to do is they're going to help the molecular machinery work better, and they're going to mess around with how genes are expressed. So I'm sure you've heard of mTOR. So mTOR is one of these genes that is how fast you're aging. It's your metabolic rate. So like to those bodybuilders or athletes that want to go on a high protein diet, and just, or like take 4,000 or 5,000 calories a day, they're going to raise mTOR and they're going to get strong fast. But we want mTOR to be as low as possible so we can live as long as we can without becoming decrepit.
Do you know what the mechanism is there? Why does mTOR being low impact longevity?
So there's a lot of different things that mTOR is involved with, but a lot of it has to do with just metabolic rate. You don't want to have a high metabolic rate. It's just kind of like, if you want to drive across the country and you want to do it with the least amount of gas, right? Well, you can't go 100 miles an hour, right? You're just the amount of energy that you need to go 1 mile at that speed is not nearly as efficient as if you were going 50. So it's the same kind of principle. And that's your gauge. mTOR is one of the gauges that we use. And in age reversal protocols that I've developed here in the clinic, there are a lot of things that we do to lower mTOR as much as we can through pharmaceuticals, through peptides, through IVs, that kind of stuff, on top of your lifestyle modifications. And as far as supplements go, we can turn on genes like sirtuin genes, and we can modulate AMPK and PPAR gamma and all these other mechanisms that you hear about. And without the supplement program, you're just not really going to be optimized. And, right now I'm offering to people, because if you did full medical engineering with me, it can be pretty pricey. But what I really wanted to make available to everyone is what we're calling the launch program, a supplement program, so that you can get the most important labs done for a pretty, low cost. So you can see like, well, where am I? What's my inflammation look like? What do my fatty acids look like? What kind of balance do I have here? How's my thyroid doing? What's my immune system look like? And then, have a consult, go over your medical history, and then have a supplement program made for you so that it's, tailored to you, but not extremely expensive. It's got the most basic stuff that's going to help you stay healthy and also optimize a lot of these systems. And
so
then,
I know there's no one size fits all, but if you could, because I know there's a lot of restrictions on metformin, but if you could, is that something you'd recommend to everybody? Only if you have type 2 diabetes? Like, where does your recommendation for that fall?
I mean, I pretty much, if you can handle metformin in your gut, and there's a few people that they really can't, but if you look at the studies that they did on animals with metformin, they start them off pretty much when they're born. They don't do it later in life. And when all the studies with metformin is you have extended life, and you have less cancer. And the people that don't like metformin, they're like, oh, you're harming the mitochondria, through AMPK and these other things. And I just don't buy it, because how can all these organisms have extended life if their mitochondria are harmed? So if metformin was really causing a lot of harm, it wouldn't be able to do that. Now,
do
the
you
only
take
time
metformin?
I do. So I've been on metformin since 2008. And, I always like to show people biological age versus chronological age. Horowitz,
do you look at methylation for that? What are you using as the clock?
Yeah. So Horowitz came out with the first clocks. I moved over to a clock called True Age, and they're looking at far more metabolites. I think it's over 2,000 metabolites. And when we're looking at metabolites, it's just like things that are broken down by your body, and so that we can detect in the urine, or we can detect in the blood, or we can detect in feces. There's things that have been excreted. So, and a lot of these are just off the blood. And so we can tell by the ratios of these metabolites what your biological age is versus your chronological age. And a lot of the patients that I've had come in their 70s that had either equal biological age to their chronological age, or a lot of them come in with an older biological age than their chronological age. After a year of medical engineering, a lot of them have turned that biological age back as much as a decade. And then we're also looking at epigenetic changes. So epigenetic changes that they're looking at in these clocks are how are genes modified over time. A lot of genes, they get turned off. So the older you get, the less access you have to running certain genes. They get methylated, they get acetylated, you get these things called histone modifications, and it's just less access to this gene. And we don't really know right now how to undo all of these epigenetic changes. And that's where all the age reversal protocols are coming in. And those are looking at how do we undo these epigenetic modifications.
Now, I assume a lot of what we're talking about in the protocols is all the stuff that we've gone through so far. Is there something else? Is there pharmacological interventions? Where does exercise fit into this? Like what is, if you had to wrap everything up into go live like this, go take this supplement, what does that all look like in a nutshell?
A lot of stuff, right? So, just like some of the stuff, you want to replace your hormones. You want to take certain peptides.
As you age.
Yeah, you definitely want. We have great data on that. If you don't replace, especially testosterone, it's really hard to maintain bone mass, really hard to maintain muscular mass, especially heart. And most importantly, it's hard to maintain the mass of your brain. And so now we have about 28 years of bioidentical hormone replacement. And what we're noticing is that the people that have been on bioidentical hormone replacement for that long, when you compare them to their peers, they are far more functional. They look better, their cognition's better, their musculature's better, their skin's better, like across all systems. And it's because these hormones are the triggers to turning on a lot of genes. And so they're not going to epigenetically modify their genes as much. They're going to keep on all these things, these repair mechanisms. They're going to keep things working well. One of the things I'm always telling people is that we want to live longer in health so that we can live long enough for the future. So in my field and the places I speak and the people that are working in this, we think about 50 years. In about 50 years, the technology is going to be there to reverse your age and basically be close to immortal.
Now you're talking about language.
But we need to survive. So we're using peptides. We're using senolytics. So senolytics are the supplements and the IVs and all that kind of stuff that are going to kill your senolytic cells. And some of that you're going to be doing water fasting and things like that. And then we also do a lot of work on spirit. And, spirit's kind of a weird word to use, but if you have a powerful spirit, and somebody comes up to you and says some nasty stuff, it doesn't do anything to you, right? You don't ruminate about it. You don't explode on that person. You just notice that this person's just compromised, right? And you see things for what they are, and you have trust in yourself, and you have control over your emotions, right? That's a powerful spirit. Like, you act exactly the way you want to act at all times. And it doesn't come from believing in some dogma. It comes from working deeply on yourself. Mindfulness, diving deep into your past and understanding what negative patterns that you have that are prevalent today that hijack you. And then how are we going to replace those negative patterns with the positive patterns that led you to all your successes in life? So we work on a lot of that. And in the clinic, I do a lot of ketamine psychotherapy. And it helps you disassociate yourself from your ego, and you're able to go, deep into your subconscious, or some people call it the spirit world, and you're able to gather a lot of information. And it's guided. It's only one-on-one, unlike some of these people that go for shamanism events, and they get some benefit from it. But like you're sitting in a room with 12 people, this is one-on-one. It's highly guided, so that they take a week to create their intentions and their suggestions to themselves. Proper set, that's called the set, and then the setting is the room that they're in. They're just here with me. We usually have binaural beats on in the background to help them, guide through that place. I'm talking with them. And then afterwards, we do like an hour and a half of debrief and write huge notes out. And then they go and they journal. And a lot of people will say like, oh, I died. And I'm like, oh, you died? And I'm like, okay.
They say that while they're in it?
Yeah. That's a really common thing, is that they died. But then they're still there. Right. And then they kind of forget that they're human and who they are, and they're able to see things without all the filters that we have built into us. Even highly educated people can easily be duped because it goes along with their delusional thoughts of the world, delusional thoughts of themselves, what they believe, all that kind of stuff. Like, even when a lot of people are presented with truth, they don't want to integrate it, because it would go against this whole delusion that they have of themselves and of the world, and it's too scary. But when you're disassociated, well, you're open to the truth. You're able to see that, and you're able to bring that back with you.
Talk to me, when you're trying to walk somebody through that, what kind of truths are you introducing them to? And obviously I know that it's going to be different from person to person to person, but if there are like themes that come up, that'd be really interesting to hear about.
Yeah, the most interesting thing that I've noticed with ketamine psychotherapy is that no one ever has the same experience twice, and no patient I've ever had go under has had really a similar experience to anybody else. The only thing similar is that they get disassociated and they say they died. But as far as what they experience, it's totally separate.
But when you talk about the truth and helping them integrate the truth, I'm absolutely fixated on this notion of seeing a truth that you were unable to see before and learning to integrate it. So with or without ketamine, do you see something in them that you don't think they understand? Like, is it this person? It's
not that I see something in them. I'll talk to them. We'll have like an hour consult, mostly about what is troubling you the most. Like, what are the things that are preventing you from being the person that you know that you could be, right? And it could be a wide range of things. Anxiety is really high in a lot of people, and so is depression. But it's like, all right, but what's the root of that? And maybe they'll be like, oh, I was traumatized from here or that, but they don't really know, like, what is it? What's at the foundation of that? What belief system did I crystallize from those experiences that are affecting me? Because those experiences don't exist. They're in the past, right? But there's some pattern and some belief structure that got crystallized that's affecting you in the real time. So when you get some of the information from doing some of these deep dives into yourself, you can say, oh, I see that clearly now. And a lot of people will say that after the experience that they feel so much lighter. So I think that it just really helps people. It's just another tool, right? I think they still need to do other tools. A lot of the other tools that we use are like neurofeedback and biofeedback, just to break some of these physiological patterns that people have. So there's not just one thing for everyone, but we try to use a bunch of these different things to help them optimize their spirit.
And how does that help with anti-aging? Just it's lowering their stress levels?
Oh, that stress is probably one of the fastest aging components that we have to deal with. Somebody that is highly stressed with what they're doing, and it's not everyone, but a lot of people will have problems with their pelvic floor. And it's kind of like, you see a threat as a primitive animal, and the first thing you do is you clench your pelvic floor. It's just a reaction because you don't want to urinate, you don't want to defecate, right? And then you're triggering the vagus nerve to shut down your immune system, your gut, all the unnecessary things. And so you see people with a lot of gut disorders, and they're like, oh, I bloat all the time, and I don't go to the bathroom, and I'm constipated, I'm super high stress, right? And their blood pressure's up, or their pulse is up, and their hands are cold. And it's like, yeah, because you're in fight or flight like all day. And that's going to age you so fast. And that's where biofeedback comes in really handy, is because we hook them up to chest straps and electrodes, and they can see whether they're in this pattern of, whether they're in this fight or flight or not. And a lot of it has to do with getting into this pattern called coherence. So when you're in coherence, your breathing rate and your heart rate are kind of synchronous to each other. And that's when you shut down the sympathetic nervous system and you promote the parasympathetic, which is rest and relaxation. And that's where you want to be. Your average person, we hook them up and they can't get into coherence. But if you took somebody from like a Buddhist monastery or something that's been there for 30 years and you hook them up, like they're in coherence. So just great tools that we have for everything. And that's why it's engineering based, because there's not a system of the body that we're not looking at and that we're not trying to optimize, because it all works together. You can't just say, I'm going to optimize your heart. There's no way. It's impossible, right? Everything's connected. And so we have to look at all the systems and see where we're at.